Hello and welcome to episode 17 of Reflecting the Way Radio. I'm your host, Evan. Just at the top of the show here, a couple of reminders. If you haven't already done so, please go check us out on Facebook and Twitter. Twitter tag is @ReflectTheWay. We're Reflecting the Way on Facebook. And don't forget to check us out at our homepage, reflectingtheway.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for our email list. We certainly don't flood you with emails. Maybe get one a month, let you know what's going on. And be sure to also check out the companion article, for this episode, Saturn Symbols in Society Today. You will find all of our social media pages, our homepage, and the article linked in the description box below. Okay, so the show today may be a little bit more laid back. This article was that we wrote here about Saturn Symbols in Society is a bit more laid back than the rest of the series in some ways. There's a lot that we could have covered. There's a lot we did cover. There's a lot we didn't cover. I would highly encourage you to go check that out. Maybe even pull that up as I'm talking here, as you're listening to me, because there are quite a few images that go along with that article that we'll probably be referencing here in this episode. And without any context, you might not have a hot clue what I'm talking about. So I will just go through the article here, and I'll just kind of commentate on the different aspects that we talked about in the article. I'm sure there will be more detail in the article about each item, each point, and each structure. And I may throw in a few things that aren't in the article in this episode just for giggles. So far in this series, we have talked a lot about alternative views of history, hypothetical situations, what ifs, mythology, religion, a whole lot of theoretical type stuff. This article in this episode kind of changes that, where now we are looking at how this has actually how this has permeated society for many, many, many centuries. And if you're looking at the article, if you scroll through it, you'll see a bunch of modern structures. And most of what we're going to talk about here has to do with modern society. I really wanted to bring this topic home, so to speak, make it live for you, the audience, because we've kind of talked about some pie-in-the-sky sort of concepts until this point. And even if you don't completely understand the symbolism yet, because we haven't completely unpacked it yet, even if you don't understand the symbols, this should give you some fantastic context for when we do discuss the intricacies and the implications of these symbols in society. And I think if you know what they are, know where they are, and you've seen some of them, when we get into the deeper things as it relates to Saturnian occultism, it's really going to click for you, and you're really going to be left mouth agape, shaking your head. So we won't get too detailed on why these things are what they are necessarily, but just be aware that these things exist, and if you've been following along, you'll understand how and why this relates to the Saturn issue. So if you're following along with the article, the first picture you're going to see there is from Santa Ana, California, from a science discovery center. It's called the Discovery Cube. That is the name of the museum or the science center. And the picture you will see there is a large black cube. Now, it is officially a solar array, but it's a big black cube. Now, if you were making a solar array in the middle of a city, don't you think, from a strictly pragmatic point of view, there would be better ways to build that structure? Well, whoever designed it to be a gigantic, I believe it was, you can check me on this, but I believe it was 10 stories tall, this 10-story tall cube standing up on its corner. Now, maybe it's a good time to mention right here at the beginning that if you want to chalk this up to coincidence, I can't convince you otherwise. Though if you're like me and don't believe in coincidence, you could maybe write one of these things off as a one-off. But when you start looking, you see this everywhere. So it's not coincidental. This is done by design. Whether it's done by design consciously through human elements on purpose, or whether this is some kind of spiritual synchronicity where artists and architects have forces whispering in their ear that they don't even understand or realize or comprehend or acknowledge, I don't know, and frankly, I'm not going to speculate, at least not here right now. Some of these, I will say, there was obviously some intentionality. Some of them I'm not so sure. I'll leave it up to you. But this solar array cube, if you're looking at that, just take a good look and ask yourself, why on earth would you make a solar array that shape? You don't have to be a scientist to know that there would be better shapes to build a solar array. It just doesn't make good sense. And I think people need to trust their common sense a little more. So when you look at that and say, that doesn't seem to make sense, well, the scientists must have known what they were doing. No. There's more at play here. And besides just the pragmatic aspect of capturing the maximum amount of solar radiation to convert to electricity, just look at the way that structure is built. A cube tipped up on its corner. That can't have been cheap or easy to design. So why do it that way? Well, there were forces at work, conscious or unconscious, that's telling you something. Now, if you've been following along, you know black is the color of Saturn, and a cube is its primary symbol. Now, something that I find particularly interesting about this is that we're told in, I believe, 1 John, that the whole world lies in wickedness. Some translations say the whole world lies in the evil one. Where is this cube parked? It's parked outside of a science center. Well, what is science? Science is the study of the physical world. The physical world lies in wickedness, or lies in the evil one. So it's very fitting that there is a large black cube, the symbol of the Lord of this world, not over this world, but of this world. There is a difference. This large black cube is parked outside of a center dedicated to the study of the fallen world. Now, I find that incredibly interesting all on its own. For more details, I again just encourage you to go check out the article. I'm not going to park too long on any one of these, as this is audio and this is not highly conducive to the audio format because we are talking about images here. So again, just go check that out. It's linked in the description box below. We'll move through here pretty quick today, and we'll try and get to the crux of the matter here in relatively short order. So carrying on, again, if you're going to write this off as coincidence, you're listening to the wrong show and you're reading the wrong article, frankly. So I'm not going to keep apologizing for that. But the next picture you'll find in that article is a large, honestly pretty interesting looking structure. It is called the Alamo statue. It is found in New York City. It's named the Alamo because the artist's wife looked at it and decided that the scale of it, the large, heavy nature of this thing, reminded her of the Alamo. So the Alamo is actually a nickname. What this statue's proper name is the Astor's Place Cube. Now, if you're familiar with the quote-unquote Illuminati, that term is technically obsolete, but anyway, you will know that the Astor family, A-S-T-O-R, is or was, depending who you ask, one of the driving forces of what is colloquially called the Illuminati, especially in the American Northeast, and especially during, I would say, the 1800s. Now, this is named after them, and it's a big black cube in the middle of a park. So, again, coincidence? No, I don't think so. Was the artist involved, conscious of what he was doing? I don't know. Were the people that commissioned the statue conscious of what this was? I don't know. But frankly, it doesn't matter. Given the name, given the place, and given the nature of this statue, it's pretty obvious who this hails to. So you can take a look at that and you can decide for yourself. The next item we covered here was a modern art exhibit erected in Hamburg, Germany in 2007 by an artist named Gregor Schneider. And as far as I am aware, this has been taken down, but it was erected in 2007, and I found some references to another exhibit that's almost identical being erected in Sydney, Australia, but I couldn't verify it. So what this was, literally, was just a big black cube. You know, kind of your stereotypical modern art display. And I mean, this thing was big. Like, it was, I'm just looking at the picture here, and based on the guy standing next to it, I'd say it was probably 2 or 3 stories tall. And the artist himself said that this was to be a metaphor or a commentary on religious unity, and it was inspired by the Kaaba. The Kaaba, if you've read or followed along with our previous sections and episodes here, you will know the significance of that, of the Islamic people making pilgrimage to Mecca to walk circles around a giant black cube. Well, this is a giant black cube inspired by the Kaaba, erected in Hamburg as a modern art display. Now, that right there, to me, is damning evidence on its own. But if you just look at it, especially if you have spiritualized the sea, you will notice exactly who this is hailing to. And based on the fact that this artist said this had to do with religion, should give you some indication of this guy's motivation and what he was thinking. Now, am I saying that the artist himself knew exactly what he was doing? No, but he had some inkling. He must have, because he himself said that this was a commentary on religious unity. So you can take a look again and you can make up your own mind. And for our next example here, we'll skip back across the pond, and even if you're not following along, I'm sure most people listening will know what I'm talking about here. We'll jump back to New York City, and many people are familiar with the large glass cube outside of the Apple store in New York with the Apple logo suspended in it. Now, we may come back to this in the future and really dig in, because this is really loaded. But, I mean, stereotypical, what does an apple with a bite out of it represent? And I know there's a big debate over what the Apple logo really stands for, but it seems pretty obvious to me that when you take a symbol that is commonly associated, albeit incorrectly, but commonly associated with the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you take that apple, show it having a bite out of it, and putting it in the middle of the symbol of the Dark Lord of time and death himself, for crying out loud, I think it's pretty clear what they're showing you here. The specifics I won't get into, but this is a metaphor for reality. I'll let you think about that for a while. We're going to unpack that probably either in our next chapter or the chapter following, coming soon, so stay tuned. And I'll just mention at this point that even though it's pretty commonly accepted among most so-called Christians that the story of Adam and Eve deals with an apple, you will notice, if you're a keen-eyed reader of Genesis, it never says that it was an apple. And if you read any of the deuterocanonical books or the Apocrypha, specifically First Enoch, you will see, and it is my tentative opinion, that the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, we do not have a direct analog to that today. I believe that is a unique one-off tree that doesn't, it wasn't an apple tree with special apples or a peach tree with special peaches on it. But if I had to make an analogy, I would say that the fruit on the tree of knowledge of good and evil likely was similar to what you would picture in your mind as a bundle of grapes, or a cluster of grapes, excuse me. Not necessarily strictly that important, definitely interesting. We won't park there for now as we're not focused there, but we'll hang around New York here for our next example. And again, if you're not following along, maybe many of you have seen this anyway, the 9/11 Memorial, the 9/11 National Memorial. It is two features, one for the North Tower, one for the South Tower. And you'll recall from our previous section about 9/11, that in and of itself is a little bit suspect, conspiracy theories aside. But anyway, if you are familiar with that monument or you're looking at it right now, you will see that effectively you have a black cube inside of a black cube and water falling down the sides. Now, the water falling down the sides I'm going to save for later. We might come back to that. But something I want to definitely point out here. I mentioned that the Apple Store, with its glass cube and its apple, was a metaphor for reality. And I kind of left it there, and I'm still going to leave it there. But what I will tell you is when you have a cube inside of a cube, and this we will definitely come back to later, when you have a cube inside of a cube, that is what is called a tesseract. Okay? Now, this gets pretty technical pretty quick, but if you're familiar with Buddhism at all, and I'm not a Buddhist, and I don't endorse Buddhist belief, but everybody believes what they believe for some reason, and in the Buddhist belief, they have a fairly prolific belief or a fairly extensive set of myths or legends about underground or subterranean kind of hollow earth sort of civilizations. Maybe the most famous is Shambhala, sometimes called Shangri-La. They also had a belief in a sort of separate but very related civilization called Argartha. But on top of that, most people think of Buddhists as, oh yeah, those are the people that believe in reincarnation. And that's mostly true. But what most people in the West don't realize about Buddhism is that Buddhism does, in fact, have its own version of hell, a hot, fiery one. And they call it Avicii, A-V-I-C-I, Avicii. And in the Buddhist belief, Avicii is a region located under the earth, and it is a cube at the heart of the earth. Now, like I said, I'm not going to get too bogged down here, but the Apple Store is showing you what you're trapped in, essentially, a cube, the Saturn matrix. I think that might be the first time I've used that verbiage in this series, but we're going to use it a lot more here in the coming weeks, believe me. The Saturn matrix, if the whole world lies in the evil one, or the whole world lies in wickedness, that cube is a symbol of the prison that the world is in. Prison planet. Now, where have you heard that before? If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's okay. You're probably better off for it. But if that cube is a symbol for a reality, or our prison, if you like, or the realm of Saturn, his albeit temporary kingdom. And here at the 9/11 Memorial, you have a cube within a cube, and the Buddhists talk about a cube in the center of the earth being hell. What could they be telling you? What underlying granule of truth sits here, and what has been hidden here? Now, I'm not saying that the Buddhists have truth necessarily, but what I am saying is the dark side is telegraphing you something here. Ponder that for a while. Take that one to the Father and see what you come up with. I think if you have your ears open, what you hear might surprise you. So let's keep moving here. The next picture in the article, the next thing that we covered, was the United Nations prayer room or meditation room. And if you've spent any amount of time in the conspiracy sort of community or even the alternative Christian community, you've probably seen this before as well. It's a big black technically not quite a cube by the look of it. It looks to be slightly rectangular, but it's a big black cornerstone in this meditation room in front of this fractal sort of painting. And I can't confirm this, but I've read in a couple of places that there are always 6 chairs in that room. No more, no less. Always 6. 6 being the number of fallen man. And if you've followed along so far, you will understand some of the significance of that. So if the UN's stated goal is world peace, and their meditation or prayer room has a symbol of the Dark Lord of time and death in it, how do you suppose they might be going around getting to world peace? Yeah. Genocide, maybe? Just a thought. We all know how Saturn likes him a bloody sacrifice. Maybe the less said about that for now, the better. But anyway, moving on. Now let's look at, we'll move away from architecture here, and let's start looking at some other parts of society. In the article, I've got a picture from 2010 of the United States Supreme Court justices in their regalia. And this will hold true for many, many developed countries. I'd even venture to say most countries on the planet. Judges and all manner of law enforcement. They all wear these black robes. Maybe not the police officers themselves, though often their uniforms are black, but judges will often wear black robes. Now, why would they wear robes? Priests wear robes, right? Clan members wear robes. Celts wear robes. Satanists wear robes. Robes, why robes? Robes tend to, generally speaking, be associated with religion. Even royalty wears robes, and that definitely harks back to religious orders. So why do justices wear robes, specifically black ones? Well, maybe I should mention right now that, again, it's important to realize that perhaps not all of these people know exactly what they're involved in, but regardless, they're still involved in it. This isn't meant to disparage individuals necessarily, but it doesn't do any good to stick our head in the sand either. So if you recall from I believe it was our last chapter, we talked about 9/11, or dialing 911, and we talked about how Saturn is, in some senses, a god of justice. Now, what is a judge if not somebody who dispenses justice? If Saturn is the little g god of justice, his own special twisted variety, and you have judges wearing black robes dispensing justice in buildings, especially if you're dealing with, older sort of courthouses, buildings by and large designed by the Masons, judges who by and large have connections to secret fraternities, and they're wearing black robes, meting out justice. What are they doing? There's more detail of this in the article, so check that out. But if they're wearing black robes and they're doing basically the dirty work of a little g god of justice, and they look a lot like priests, could they be priests after some Saturnian religious order? Could they be priests in a sense that they mete out justice and they cause certain changes to effect in the population? We'll come back to that. Go check out the picture and go check out the section below it, and you tell me if it looks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, if it walks like a duck. Is it a dog or is it a duck? Pretty common sense if you ask me. So, in a related vein, let's take a look at academics. When you graduate, or if you watch somebody graduate, what do they wear? Well, there's those black robes again. Okay, so we'll park there. What do you wear on your head? You wear this square hat called a mortarboard. What the gherkin is a mortarboard? Well, a mortarboard is what a bricklayer uses to mix, scrape, and dispense mortar onto bricks. So why would you wear that on your head? Good question, right? Well, this is lifted from Masonry, Freemasonry. Should come as no shock. And the one thing I want you to notice here is it's square. It is the two-dimensional representation of the cube. And you're wearing that on your head. Sounds a lot like the Jewish Teflon, doesn't it? That we covered in our last article. Now, here's another thing I want you to consider. And there's a pretty meaty section on this in the article. But just real quickly, what is graduation? In most of the Western or developed world, we either have kindergarten through grade 12 of academics or grades 1 through 13. Now, there is some variation from region to region, but that's pretty generally true. You generally have 13 grades of education. Now, I'll try and not get on my soapbox here, but education is not teaching, for one. It is training. You are not taught to think. You are not taught to be critical. You are trained to conform. You are trained to think a certain way. You are trained to think within certain boundaries. There is the perception of choice. There is the perception of alternate viewpoints. But all of the choices you are presented with and all of the viewpoints you are presented with, spectrum, that entire paradigm is controlled. It is full spectrum dominance. And anything outside of that full spectrum dominance is branded as nuts, whack job, extreme, evil, or something to be feared. Highly recommend the book 1984, but that's a complete aside. Not for kids, though. Bear that in mind. So you go through 13 years of training. And what are grades, really? Grades, if you want to take it right down to its bare meaning, grades are degrees. Grades are a set of chunks of something bigger, right? They are degrees in the same way you have Masonic degrees. So your grade 12 or your senior graduation is not in fact the graduation. It is a graduation. It is the 13th graduation in a series of graduations that you've already gone through, or a series of degrees where you receive your 13th degree or diploma sometimes, but it is in fact your 13th grade or your 13th degree. Now, again, there's more detail in the article, and maybe that's not enough for everybody to grasp what I say next, but if you've been going through a series of degrees and you are graduating and receiving a final degree, and you are wearing black-robed regalia with the symbol of Saturn on your head, I didn't even talk about the tassel being switched from right side to left, which is a symbol of turning to selfishness, right? Left-hand path, left-handedness is generally associated with evil. You have all this regalia, and your tassel moves from right to left, and you've gone through this series of indoctrination. What is that, if not an initiation into some sort of order? And the order you're being initiated into is what we call society, because those who don't graduate generally are not accepted by society. You have a hard time getting a job. You can't go to college. That's another one we won't get too far into, but where does the word college come from? It comes from collegia, where you have the collegia, or the College of Cardinals in the Catholic Church, that dates back several hundred years. Okay, that's not an academic word. That is a religious terminology. Same with university, but we won't go there. So you are being initiated into an order. You are being initiated into the world order. Old or new, frankly, I don't care, because the world lies in the evil one. And you're doing it in black robes with a black square on your head and moving your tassel from right to left, you are being initiated into an order that effectively is a prison with no bars, or it is a prison with bars that you can't see. And because you have been so comprehensively indoctrinated for 13 years from the age of 4 or 5 years old, you are beyond the point of being able to see what is going on. And unfortunately, 98 or 99% of people will never realize what this is. This isn't just about school. This is a systemic problem that has been engineered by the people who control the world and the entities behind them, the non-human forces, in order to keep you down on a lower operational emotional frequency and literally vampirize you. Maybe that's all I'll say about that for now. So we'll just keep moving on here. Consider that. Really chew on it, because we're going to come back to that in some much greater detail quite shortly. And if we keep moving on here, the next picture in the article is of a Catholic priest, again wearing the black robe. So who's he working for? I won't spend really any time here, but I just want to point out that if you look at that picture and count closely, I think you will find that the black robe that Catholic priest is wearing has 33 buttons on it. Somehow I kind of doubt that's a coincidence. The Freemasons and the Jesuits officially hate each other, but behind closed doors, I do believe there are some very interesting deals done. So we'll just keep clipping right along here. I don't want to sound like I'm Catholic bashing, but the next picture is of Pope Benedict at an outdoor mass wearing a red hat. Now, I'm not Catholic bashing any more than I'm anybody else bashing. If you're listening to this and you consider yourself an evangelical, just you wait, your turn is coming. So don't get too comfortable. But the red hat you see the Pope wearing in that picture is called the Cappello Romano. And my Italian or Latin isn't very good, so you can pardon my pronunciation. But there's another name for that hat, and it is called the Cappello Saturno, and that is exactly what it sounds like, the hat of Saturn. Why is a so-called Christian leader wearing a hat named after the Dark Lord? That would be like him wearing a hat called the Satan cap. Literally no different. So I won't say too much more than that for now, but we are going to now talk about something that you married folks may find highly uncomfortable. Wedding rings. There's no easy way to say this. Wedding rings hark to nothing other than the rings of Saturn. Now, check out the article for full details, but essentially what you have when you get married in Western society is a legal bond, again, Saturn being the little g god of the law and justice, a legal bond solidified by the exchange of two rings. Rings obviously represent the feminine aspect of Saturn. And I understand in certain parts of Europe, they wear their wedding bands on the right hand. And doesn't necessarily invalidate what I'll say next, but it does kind of change a bit of the dynamic. Though for Western audiences, or maybe I should say North American audiences, this is highly interesting because you have taken a pledge of selfless love and devotion to your significant other, and you then exchange rings, which are a symbol of Saturn, right? That's kind of bad to begin with, but if we look at the significance here, you put that ring on your partner's left ring finger. Now, the ring finger in palm reading is ruled by the sun, okay? And it's also associated with your heart. Now, the heart reference should be immediately obvious as to what that could hail to, heart, love, all that. The heart is also associated with the soul, and when you marry somebody, obviously you do form a soul tie with them in a good sense, but you've solidified this vow with symbol of the Dark Lord put on your solar heart finger. Now, I'm not endorsing the occult here, but this practice goes back to a time where people probably did know what they were doing, and unfortunately that's carried over to today, and the symbolism hasn't changed. Now, I just want to remind you that if you read or listened to our section on Saturn and symbols of an ancient alien sky, you will know that the sun, Saturn either was literally or was simply associated with the sun, or a sun before the sun we have now. So while technically your middle finger is ruled by Saturn in palm reading, and your ring finger is ruled by the sun we have now, you can make just a small logical leap and say that your ring finger can also be associated with Saturn, in the sense that many ancient cultures and occult schools today still believe that Saturn is what they is or was what is called the greater sun. Okay, so you have two references to Saturn there. Now, again, this may only make sense in North America. That's fine. Everything up until now is kind of ubiquitous, as far as I know. Just this next point may only be a North American thing, but you put it on your left hand. Now, here's a contradiction to beat all. You've just taken an oath of basically dying to self in the name of loving another, self-sacrificial love. And then you go and you bind that vow by putting this Saturnian symbol on your and your partner's left hand. Left-handedness, or the left-hand path, is associated most closely with self-worship and evil. Okay? Self-worship when you've just taken a vow of selfless love. That one I'd like somebody to explain to me. So that's all I'll say about that for now. And I'm not telling you to chuck your wedding rings. That needs to be completely a matter of conscience, and I completely leave it up to you, the listener and the reader, as to what, if anything, you want to do about that. But being ignorant doesn't help you, so now you know. Do with that information as you will. That's not kind of a subject that I would dictate to somebody what to do about it. You take that to the Father and let him tell you what to do about it, if anything. I totally understand that there is a certain degree of intentionality when you start dealing with things like this, where because we have to live and function in society, sometimes we have to make exceptions so that we can even communicate with people. Some of this wasn't in the article, but I'll mention it here briefly. Even our language has been saturated in this system. Even, the Sabbath in Judaism and certain sects of Christianity is still Saturday. What is Saturday? Well, it should be pretty obvious if you've been following along, and I just said that. Saturday literally is Saturn's day. That's what it is. Sunday is the sun's day, not S-O-N-S-U-N, the big fiery ball in the sky. Many of our weekdays are named after pagan deities, and Saturday, Saturn's day, is basically, it's the Sabbath. And again, this harks back to the whole confusion between Elohim, El the Father, and El Saturn, right? And that name has permeated a lot of our language as well. How do you become, a world ruler or a world controller? How do you become the president or the prime minister? Well, you are elected, E-L, Saturn, right? You are elected to be elevated to the rank of Elite or elite, right? Elite would even, elite, if you say it as Elite, how it's spelled, Elite, would even tend to sort of imply a religious connotation. And this goes on and on and on, and that's kind of all I'm going to say about that for now. You can dig more into that on your own if you like. This topic is large, and frankly, it's hard to quantify how big this is. There's just a few examples in this article. I quit to keep myself and the reader sane, frankly. I didn't even talk about corporate logos other than Apple, but that rabbit hole is dark, deep, and twisty, I tell you what. I guess we talked about NASA at an earlier section as well, but if you just open your eyes and start looking and listening to what people say, the words they use, you just open your eyes and look around. Even in your own hometown, you will start to see this everywhere. So I would highly encourage you to check, do some of your own digging here and just see how deep these roots go. And I'm hoping in the next week here, certainly in the next 2 weeks, I will have another article out. Tentatively, the article is titled Freemasonry and the Occult Nature of Reality. So that should be good, because now we're going to start really getting into the meat and potatoes and bringing this topic right down to brass tacks for you and making this really live. So this article in this episode essentially was context, so that when we start unpacking this, you can look back here and see, oh my goodness, look at what this means and where this all is. So have a look at those pictures. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook and Twitter, at Reflect the Way on Twitter and Reflecting the Way on Facebook. Sign up for our email list at reflectingtheway.com. Check out those links in the description box below. And until next time, blessings.